Class is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the I Think My Sister May Have an Eating Disorder, How to Offer Support and Encouragement webinar. My name is Amanda Rufo, and I will be your technical producer this afternoon. This webinar will be presented by Allison Arnett. Our goal is to educate collegiate and alumni women on eating disorders and to provide resources for support. This webinar is being recorded, and an online archive will be available to view on the Kappa website in approximately 2 weeks. We're going to go ahead and get started, so let me turn it over to Allison.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, my name is Allison Arnett. I hold a master's degree in social work, and I'm currently a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Georgia. I work with children and adolescents currently with severe emotional and behavioral disorders. I live in Atlanta. I am a Kappa trainer, and I also am the vice board chairman for the Emory chapter, Epsilon Epsilon. I attended the University of Florida and was a member of the Epsilon Phi chapter there. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope as we go through this presentation you will get all the information you need and how to support a sister that you think may have an eating disorder. Okay, here's our agenda for the afternoon. We're first going to go over what are eating disorders, the basic definitions of the eating disorders. Next, the signs and symptoms of eating disorders, the causes for eating disorders. The next thing, we're going to talk about what to do if you're concerned about your sister or your friend. We're going to go over the do's and don'ts of talking to your sister about your concerns. I'm going to show you where to find help and support for you and your sister. We're going to look at the different treatment options for those with eating disorders. And then we're going to talk about taking care of yourself. What about me? As we go through this presentation, we're going to learn a lot about how to take care of your sister, but we cannot forget that we need to take care of ourselves first. Then I'm going to tell you some of the resources that I used to putting together this presentation, and then there will definitely be a time to ask your questions or voice your concerns. Okay, next, what is an eating disorder? Eating disorders such as anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder include extreme emotions, attitudes, and behaviors surrounding weight and food issues. Eating disorders are serious emotional and physical problems that can have life-threatening consequences for males and for females. And I put in a stat here down at the bottom, says the rate of development of new cases of eating disorders has been increasing since 1950. So we have yet to see a decrease in eating disorders, even though all the treatment options that are out there and all the education that's out there, we're still seeing increases in eating disorders every year. Okay, here's a question for you guys. How many Americans have an eating disorder? A, 1 million, B, 3 million, C, 5 million, or D, 8 million? All right, you ready for the answer? The answer is 8 million Americans have an eating disorder. 7 million women and 1 million men. So again, a much more larger majority of women suffer from eating disorders. Okay, we're going to go over 3 eating disorders as stated earlier: anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And the first one we're going to talk about is anorexia. Anorexia is an eating disorder characterized by immoderate food restriction and irrational fear of gaining weight, as well as a distorted body self-perception. It typically involves excessive weight loss and is usually found more in females than in males. Because of the fear of gaining weight, people with this disorder restrict the amount of food they consume. And anorexia is often characterized by the low body weight, inappropriate eating habits, obsession with having a thin figure. And often those that suffer from anorexia often view themselves as too fat, even though they really are underweight. And they may practice repeated weight measuring, mirror gazing, alongside with other obsessive actions to make sure they're still thin. And this is often known as body checking. And, you know, every morning we all spend time in the mirror, making sure our hair is okay and our makeup's on right. But women with anorexia often spend an obsessive amount of time in front of the mirror, checking their body, rechecking their body, rechecking their body. It can be hours of their day spent in front of the mirror. So here are the signs and symptoms of anorexia nervosa: refusal to maintain a normal body mass index for their age, the absence of 3 or more consecutive menstrual cycles. They're fearful of even gaining the slightest weight, and they take all precautionary measures to avoid gaining weight or becoming overweight. They have an obvious, rapid, dramatic weight loss. They have soft, fine hair growing on the face or the body. They're obsessed with calories and fat food content of food. And of course, we all are concerned about the calories and fat content on food, but those with anorexia are overly obsessed with calories and fat. They can spend a lot of time analyzing every amount of food that they consume and looking at the calories and the fat content. They have preoccupation with food, recipes, or cooking. They may cook elaborate dinners for others, but not eat the food themselves. And dieting despite being thin or dangerously underweight. And they often perform rituals, such as cutting their food into tiny pieces, refusing to eat meals around others, or they hide or they discard of food. And this can be seen for those chapter women who have a meal plan within their sorority house. If there's a woman that never eats within the sorority house, they may come up with excuses that they don't like the food or they're not hungry. But if somebody is never eating around another person, that may be a sign and a symptom of an eating disorder. They also may engage in frequent, strenuous exercise, and this can often be done in hiding. So maybe they will say they're going to class, but really they're going to the gym, or they may wake up very early in the morning to exercise before others get up, so that others are not sure how often they really are exercising. They have a perception of themselves of being overweight, despite being told by others that they are too thin, and in most cases they are often very underweight. They can become intolerant to the cold and frequently complain of being cold because that's the loss of insulating body fat. They may frequently be sad, lethargic, and think of us when we're hungry, when we've skipped a meal or haven't had a meal, how we can become really lethargic. We can become grumpy, we become tired. So these women that are never eating the appropriate amount of food, they can frequently be sad and lethargic. They may avoid friends and family, become withdrawn and secretive. They often have bad breath from the vomiting or starvation-induced ketosis. They have hair thinning or hair loss, fatigue, and rapid mood swings. Again, when we're not getting the right nutrition within our bodies, it affects our moods. The next eating disorder we're going to go over is bulimia nervosa. And bulimia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by binge eating and purging, or consuming a large amount of food in a short amount of time, followed by an attempt to rid oneself of the food consumed, which is called purging. And that's typically by vomiting, taking a laxative or diuretic, and or excessive exercise because of an excessive concern for body weight. And this is a really dangerous habit. And most time the sufferers can be of average weight, and the people that are struggling with bulimia recognize that their behaviors are unusual and perhaps very dangerous to their health. These are the signs and symptoms of bulimia. They can often have chronic gas reflux when eating, dehydration caused by the frequent vomiting, oral trauma, and this occurs with the inserting their fingers and vomiting. It can cause lacerations within the lining of the mouth and the throat, constipation, calluses or scars in the back of the hand due to the trauma from making themselves throw up by putting their hands in their mouth. Oftentimes their incisors or teeth do leave marks on their hands. Constant weight fluctuations are common. Severe dental erosion or erosion of the tooth enamel, again from the acid of throwing up. Fixation on number of calories consumed. Fixation and extreme consciousness of weight. Low self-esteem, irregular menstrual cycle, and constant trips to the bathroom. This is a big sign, the constant trips to the bathroom. Oftentimes those with bulimia may eat a normal meal, but then go to the bathroom in order to throw it up. Or if they are taking laxatives or diuretics, they are going to be going to the bathroom much more often. The next disorder we're going to talk about is binge eating disorder. And although it's not yet classified as a separate eating disorder, binge eating disorder, also called BED, usually leads to obesity, although it can occur in normal weight individuals. BED disorder is a serious eating disorder in which you frequently consume unusually large amounts of food, And for these individuals, overeating crosses the line as it becomes a regular occurrence and is usually done in secret. So we think about ourselves and we think, of course, there's always a time when we overstuff ourselves. For example, Thanksgiving, when we go home for a weekend and our mom cooks our favorite home-cooked meal, we often eat too much and find ourselves stuffed. Well, those with binge eating disorders do this on a regular basis, several times a week. When you have a binge eating disorder, you may be deeply embarrassed about gorging and vow to stop. That's often why it's done in secret. You also may feel such a compulsion that you can't resist the urges and continue to binge eat. These are the signs and symptoms of a binge eating disorder. They often feel a loss of control of what they're eating during a binge. In other words, they just cannot stop, even though they know that they should. They usually eat large amounts of food at one time, far more than what a typical person may eat. They eat much more quickly during a binge eating episode, so they often just stuff their mouths full of food. They eat until physically uncomfortable or nauseated due to the amount of food consumed, and they often eat when depressed or bored. More signs and symptoms. They eat large amounts of food, even though they may really not be hungry. They often eat during periods of normal eating, eat alone during periods of normal eating. They often feel that food is an embarrassment, that they will overeat and that others will notice it, so they often do eat alone. They can feel disgusted, depressed, or guilty after binge eating. And the binge eating occurs on average about at least twice a week for 6 months. So again, this is something that is occurring very often. And also, this is separate from the bulimia and anorexia. Often bulimics will binge eat, but they will then purge. And binge eating does not have the purging aspect to it. Okay, another question for everyone out there. Which is the most common eating disorder? Anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, or binge eating disorder? And the answer is C. Binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder in the United States, and the prevalence of BED is estimated to be approximately 1 to 5% of the population. Okay, the next thing we're going to go over are the causes of an eating disorder, and there are several causes, and they fall into different categories. There's biological, psychological, family environment, adaptation to the environment, and social and cultural. So there are biological causes to eating disorders. We haven't quite found out why. Science and studies are still working to find out where the biological link is, but eating disorders are found to be genetic. They're also psychological. There are certain personality characteristics that can cause an eating disorder, such as low self-esteem, perfectionism, or being socially anxious. And please keep in mind that just because you have low self-esteem or have an anxiety disorder, that does not mean that you're automatically going to have an eating disorder. What these causes are saying is what they did was they got a collection of those with eating disorders together, polled them, and found out that most of them had low self-esteem, perfectionism, and were socially anxious. But just because you have these things doesn't mean you're automatically going to have an eating disorder. We also look at the family environment. Those with eating disorders often come from a family environment that have overprotective parents, where autonomy is not encouraged and conflicts are not resolved, and there are also body image issues within the home, either with a mother or a sister or even with a male in the home. And here's another statistic that I thought very alarming. It says 46% of 9 to 11-year-olds are sometimes or very often on diets. So that's almost half of 9 to 11-year-olds that state that they are sometimes or very often on diets, and that 82% of their families are sometimes or very often on diets. So again, it's the family environment. If your family environment is having body issues or eating issues, that can also lead to the children having eating issues. Next is adaptation to the environment. Sometimes eating disorders can be a response to a separation or individualization. And again, this occurs most often once they're leaving the nest and entering into college, that separation and that individualization. So we often have to look at that as a time that eating disorders may start. It's also something that some women do to exert control or kind of a nonverbal protest. If they're unhappy about something, they're not able to verbalize it, they sometimes turn to eating disorders in order to protest something. The next is social and cultural, and we're all vulnerable to doubts about our bodies. We see the beautiful women on TV and movies and magazines and music videos, and they send the message that having a better body will mean a better life. But we always have to remember that these images are often computer enhanced. And the more women strive to meet that mainstream image, the more likely they're to value thinness over attributes, which again, we need to be looking at the personal attributes and take those into much more consideration than we do how thin a person is. And I added some more statistics down here. 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of being fat. 35 to 57% of adolescent girls engage in crash dieting, fasting, self-induced vomiting, diet pills, or laxatives. And I thought that was just much, much more than I would ever imagine. And eating disorders can be contagious in nature by sharing weight loss tactics. So we all have to be very, very aware of this phenomenon within your sorority house, your dorm, your apartment, and know that one sister with an eating disorder can directly or indirectly affect the eating habits of others. So I'm concerned about a sister. What should I do? By far, talking to a friend or a sister about a possible eating disorder will be the most difficult thing you do in your life. And you're going to need to get support, educate yourself, and get support for yourself in order to confront this issue. So here are some very simple do's and don'ts of when you're talking to your sister about a possible eating disorder. First, do set aside time to talk. And make sure it's not on your way to class or right before a big date. Make sure it's a time where the two of you really have time to sit down and talk about this issue. Communicate your concerns using I statements, and I'm going to give an example of this in the next slide. Next, understand that you cannot fix this problem. You are not a professional. You are not a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a social worker, a professional counselor, a psychologist. Only those can work with your sister to help fix this problem. You alone cannot fix this for her. Offer your continued support. Oftentimes when talking to a sister, she may dismiss that there's anything wrong, but always be a support to her and don't let the topic just drop. Always make sure that you are keeping up with her and checking up with her. And listen more than talk. That's very important. It shouldn't be a time to sit down with your sister and bombard her with a bunch of information. You really need to listen more to her feelings than yours. The next is what not to do. Don't accuse them of having an eating disorder. Again, only professionals can diagnose an eating disorder. Do not tell your sister or your friend that she has an eating disorder. Even though she may have many of the signs and symptoms, only a professional can actually diagnose that. Don't give advice unless you are asked, or simple solutions. So saying something like, if you would just eat more food, you would look better. If you just wouldn't exercise as much, things would be better, because there are no simple solutions to this disorder. Don't show anger or frustration. Even if you do get angry or frustrated, it may be time to end the conversation and pick up at another time. And do not bombard them with a large group of people. So don't have it be an intervention style with you and 15 of your other best friends along with this sister you're having concerns about. It can be very embarrassing for her, and she may not really feel like she can be truthful around that large amount of people. And also, do not talk about your friend behind their back. Of course, talk with a trusted older adult, talk with another sister about your concerns, but do not spread gossip behind their back around with the other sorority sisters, around campus, around your roommates. It can really lead to a lot of mistrust. Okay, so I talked earlier about using I statements, and here's an example. Here's a conversation starter, and as I read through this, you'll notice that there's more I's in here than there are U's. So it says, hey, do you have a minute to talk? Lately, I've been generally concerned about you. I've noticed you. And this is where you insert the things that you've noticed. The signs or symptoms that I listed earlier, this is where you would put those in. And I just want to check in to make sure you're doing okay. Is something wrong? If so, how can I help? I'm here for you, whatever you need. So again, this conversation starter is not accusatory. You're not saying she has an eating disorder. You're just expressing your concerns, and you're going to be specific with the behaviors that you see. Next, what kind of support is out there for my sister and me? There are lots of support options for you and for your sister that you have concerns about. I'm going to go over today online resources, how Kappa Kappa Gamma can help you, and how your campus health center can also help you. I'm going to show you several online resources. The first thing that you're going to need to do is really educate yourself on eating disorders. And I have several wonderful websites that I will share with you. This first one is the National Eating Disorder Association, and this is wonderful. I got a lot of my information for the webinar today from this website. It has a help and support column here. It has a learn column where you can learn more about disorders, ways to get involved, ways to give to the cause. It also has different stories from people that are suffering from eating disorders. It has a newsletter. It has a blog, all kinds of wonderful information. The next one I wanted to show you is from the American Psychological Association. And this one is all about eating disorders. It talks about the definitions of eating disorders. It talks about ways to find help, finding a psychologist, finding treatment. It has the latest news of eating disorders. It also has different articles that you can read that were put on by the American Psychological Association, and also books that you can learn and read to know more about. The next website I want to show you is from the National Institute of Mental Health. And this page is just on the eating disorders. Again, they offer signs and symptoms, treatment options. There's also right here a really great publication that you can read and print out, even give to people that maybe you have concerns about. They also have here science news about eating disorders. So really great new studies that are coming out about eating disorders that I just find fascinating. So those are several resources that you can plug into as far as online resources. Again, those are for you to educate yourself, and also for the sister that you have concerns about. You can always refer her to that. Here are the online resources here that I showed you. Again, the National Eating Disorder Association, American Psychological Association, and the National Institute of Mental Health. Okay, this is our last poll question for the day. Who can I go within Kappa for help? A, the Vice President of Standards, VPS, B, Vice President of Standards Advisor, or C, both the VPS and her advisor? And the answer is C. Both the VPS and her advisor should be notified when you have concerns about a sister with a possible eating disorder. So the Standards Committee is there to deal with these issues. They are the ones that are trained and have the connections with Kappa headquarters to help deal with these issues. It is recommended that the VPS advisor, VPS, and one other member of the Standards Committee meet with this member who you have concerns about. Again, like I said earlier, it's much less threatening than meeting with a large group of people or the entire Standards Committee. And it also allows fewer people to be aware of the issue, and that will lessen the gossip that may be spread around the house or campus. The member usually feels more comfortable in discussing the situation with a small group. Also within Kappa, there is an alternative standards contract, which is much more supportive than punitive and gives the Standards Committee and the member responsibilities to one another. So it's almost like a promise that the Standards Committee is going to make promises to this member and offer support, and that this member is then going to make promises back to look for help. The Alternative Standards Contract is a document that is provided on an as-needed basis by the Director of Standards after consultation with the VPS. Next one is support from your local campus health center. Campus health centers are amazing these days. They have a million resources for you and for your sister who you may have concerns about. Most health campuses have doctors and counselors available to diagnose and offer treatment to those with eating disorders. The Campus Health Center can also assist you in ways to assist your sister or friend in seeking a diagnosis for treatment. So again, if the sister you have concerns about, if she's refusing to seek treatment, it may be a good idea for you to go and talk with a counselor about ways you can help this friend see what's really occurring in her life. These campus health centers can also offer educational programming to your chapter members. So it would be wonderful if a counselor from the campus health center could maybe come to your chapter and give a presentation on eating disorders and looking for the signs and symptoms and how to offer assistance. And I brought up a couple websites of some campus health centers that I wanted to show you. I randomly just picked a couple colleges. First one is the University of Florida, and this is their Counseling and Wellness Center website, and it's amazing. It has all kinds of information on here. It has self-help resources, it has ways to make appointments to visit with a doctor. It also has this really cool thing here called At-Risk Cognito. It's helping a friend who is struggling learn how to identify and refer peers on this online training. So it's really cool. There's an online training of how to help a friend that you feel may have an eating disorder or any other kind of mental health disorder. Next website I want to bring up to you is Emory University's website. So again, this is a local college in Atlanta, and they have a wonderful counseling and psychological services department. And here they talk about different groups that they offer. They have a stress clinic. They have also a little stress test that you can take on yourself to see if maybe there are some issues pinpointed that maybe you need to seek assistance for. You can also make appointments on here and get to know more about the staff within the system. So it's a really, really great place to go. If you really have concerns for a sister, I would highly recommend contacting the local campus health center. There's several treatment options when we're looking at those with eating disorders, inpatient or outpatient. Inpatient means that the woman is going to stay at a facility 24/7. She's going to be there morning, noon, and night. It could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or longer, depending on how much treatment that she needs. There's also outpatient services, and that is where you would just go to a therapist or a doctor as maybe 1 hour a week. It could even be all day. It could be a 9 to 5, what they call day treatment program. So you would still spend the night at your house with your family or at your apartment, but would attend therapy anywhere from 1 hour a day to 8 hours a day. And the different therapies involved in inpatient or outpatient are your typical talk therapy. So that's working with a therapist. It could be a counselor, a social worker, or a psychologist, and talking about your individual issues and what you feel may have led to an eating disorder. They also offer family therapy, which is very important. As we all know, being part of a family, when one person is in crisis, the whole family is in crisis. So family therapy is a great way to get the whole family involved within treatment. And also group therapy is often involved, and that's the individual with an eating disorder meeting with other individuals with eating disorders, and they often have common signs, common symptoms, and they're able to be a support to each other and work with each other. Also, what's offered is nutritional therapy, and that would be meeting with a doctor or nutritionist to talk about reorganizing their eating habits and getting their body to a healthy place again. And the next one is pharmacotherapy, and this has to do with medications, psychotropic medications. As I said earlier, often those with an eating disorder can have mood swings, can have depression, can have anxiety. Whether that's due to their lack of nutrition or to another mental health issue, that's for the doctor to find out. But if the woman with an eating disorder also has a co-disorder, such as depression or anxiety, that can often be fixed with a psychotropic medication, because those are a brain imbalance that need to be fixed through medication in conjunction with talk therapy. All right, what about me? We've talked a lot about the sister that you have concerns about, but what about yourself? The person with an eating disorder is responsible for her own care. You must remember that. You alone cannot fix her. And you must take care of yourself first. If you see that you need help for your own eating issues or other mental health disorders, take the initiative to get help for yourself first before helping your friend. And that can be a great example to your friend that, hey, I struggled with this and I am getting help now. That can be a great example for your friend. Oftentimes I think of this as a kind of an analogy of when you're taking a flight and the stewardess is at front of the airplane and she's talking about if the oxygen mask fall from the ceiling, that you have to put it on yourself first before helping your neighbor next to you, a child or an elderly person. And same thing goes here. Put your oxygen mask on first. Take care of yourself before you start to take care of others. Here are some resources that I listed that helped me in planning this webinar today. Again, I used the National Eating Disorder Association website. I got a lot of wonderful information from them. There's also 2 books that I ordered off of Amazon for very, very low price. They were used and they were probably $2 each, but they were wonderful. The first one is Talking to Eating Disorders, and the second one was Friends Helping Friends, a guide to approaching peers about their potential eating disorder. And these were wonderful books that you can find at your library or through Amazon. And next, I'd like to open it up to questions. If there's any questions anybody has, they could ask now. I also wanted to put my email address on there. Some people may be more comfortable asking questions on an individual basis, so please feel free to email me, reach out to me, contact me if you have any questions or concerns for a friend, and I'd be more than happy to direct you in the right direction. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you joining our webinar, and I hope that you learned a lot. And Amanda's going to close us out.
Thank you, Allison. It was great having you lead our session for today, and thank you to all of those who participated. If you have any questions or comments about today's topic, you may email Allison directly at marnett, arnett99@hotmail.com. If you would like to be more involved in Kappa's virtual training and webinar programs, we would love to have you join our producer team. Please contact Karen Holmes at KKG headquarters for details. The benefits are excellent: the opportunity to support Kappa's webinar program and a front row seat at a great presentation, just like the one presented by Allison today. As we close our webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback will help us shape future webinar training events. If you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send an email to Karen Holmes, kholmes@kkg.org. Thank you.